The first thing I noticed was the shaking. Not his voice, not the bruise on his arm, not even the way he handed me his phone without a word. No, what I noticed first was how the air shifted when I hit play. The voice that came through wasn't mine, wasn't his. It was hers. Francesca Lee, my mother, his grandmother. Her voice was clipped tight as a fist. I don't care how smart you think you are, boy. You don't talk back to me. Then a sound, hard, like a book slamming or a fist on wood. I couldn't tell. What followed crushed me more than any slap could have. Your mother may play nurse all day, but don't you mistake her job for respect. You're not special, and you're sure as hell not a man. In the background, I could hear my son, his breath catching, his voice shaking as he whispered, I didn't mean to. Another impact, then silence. The kind of silence you don't come back from unchanged. I looked up at Jonas. His eyes were wide, blank, waiting. He didn't say a word. But I knew he didn't need to, because the truth had already spoken for him. Where in the world are you hearing this story from? Drop a comment and hit subscribe, especially if you've ever been told you're too sensitive for noticing what's wrong. People say Windermere Point is quiet. They mean the kind of quiet that makes snow sound louder, the kind that seeps into your bones and lingers even after spring comes back. But I learned long ago that silence doesn't mean safety, especially in my family. After the divorce, Jonas and I moved into a small rental on Spruce Hollow Drive. One story, fireplace that didn't work, walls that creaked when the wind shifted. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I worked night shifts at the only hospital within 30 miles, rotating between ER trauma and geriatric care. On paper, I was a full-time nurse. In practice, I was a full-time everything. Parent, cook, homework coach, midnight cocoa maker. Jonas never asked for much, never made me feel like I wasn't enough. He was the kind of kid who read Isaac Asimov before bedtime and built his own calculator app because the school's one sucked. He didn't have a big circle of friends, but the few he had adored him. He was 13, but felt ancient in the best way. Kind, quiet, and painfully aware of how other people felt. Francesca, my mother, hated that. Too soft, she'd scoff whenever she visited. Just like his father, always apologizing for breathing. She never liked Jonas's dad. Said I married a wet paper bag with a pulse. Said I got pregnant out of rebellion and regret. She wasn't wrong about the regret, but not in the way she meant. Francesca raised me like a soldier, sharp lines, no excuses. Affection came in the form of a packed lunch and instructions. When I scraped my knee as a kid, she didn't hug me, she taught me how to clean the wound myself. You don't cry when you bleed, she'd say. You act. I grew up thinking love was something to earn. And now, watching her hover over Jonas like a hawk with a stopwatch, I saw the pattern trying to repeat itself. We didn't visit her often. I kept our interactions short and scheduled. But last December, the flu ripped through the nursing staff at Windermere General. 3 back-to-back night shifts. No time to find a sitter. I should have said no. I should have risked calling out, but I made the call instead. Francesca picked up on the second ring. You sound tired, she said, not with concern, with satisfaction. I need help, I told her. Just 3 nights. He's old enough. You don't have to do anything, just keep him safe. She clicked her tongue. Safe is what you call raising a boy on comic books and cuddles. What he needs is structure. I paused, swallowed. I hated how she could still make me feel 10 years old. But I had no other options. That night, I packed Jonas's overnight bag. He watched me closely as I folded his favorite hoodie, the blue one with the tiny stitched rocket on the sleeve. Do I have to go? He asked softly. I looked at him, those wide eyes already bracing for disappointment. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, I said. It's just a few nights. Then we go back to movie marathons and cereal dinners. Deal? He nodded, but his shoulders didn't relax. I slipped a granola bar in the side pocket, and on a small folded note wrote, You are not too much. You are everything I wanted. The night I dropped him off, Francesca didn't open the door fully. Just enough to let him in. Just enough to block me out. Thanks, she muttered. No hug, no eye contact. The wind smelled like wood smoke and cold metal. Jonas turned to wave once, then disappeared behind the green door. I stood there longer than I needed to, watching a porch light flicker over peeling paint. Something in me twisted, but I told myself it's just 3 nights. Just 3. The first night he called me. FaceTime. He was already in pajamas, hood up knees to chest. Behind him, the wallpaper, I grew up staring at a field of faded yellow tulips peeling at the corners. Hey, Mom, he said too cheerfully. I'm good, we had soup. That was it. Not how's your shift. Not guess what I drew today. Just, we had soup. Francesca's voice echoed faintly in the background. Tell her it's time for bed. He winced, then forced a smile. Okay, gotta go. The call ended before I could say I missed him. The second night I got a text. Good. Homework done. No emojis, no silly inside jokes. Just black and white words that felt more like a report than a conversation. I replied, "Proud of you. Love you, Starlight." No answer. I stared at the screen so long it dimmed to black. By the third night, there was nothing. No call, no text, no read receipts. I tried twice. The first went to voicemail. The second rang once and stopped. I told myself not to panic. Told myself maybe Francesca made him turn off the phone at night. Maybe he forgot his charger. Maybe I was overreacting like I always do. But mothers know. We feel it in our blood when something's wrong. And that night, as I stared out the hospital break room window, watching snow spiral like ash through the parking lot lights, my stomach clenched with that familiar ancestral ache. The one that says, "Get your child, now." The next morning, I drove straight to Francesca's house after my shift. Didn't bother calling. The front steps were iced over. Her porch light still burned even though the sun had been up for hours. I knocked once, twice, then opened the door. She never locked it. The smell hit me first, boiled vegetables and ammonia, sharp, sour, clean in the wrong kind of way. Francesca was in the kitchen, wiping down an already spotless countertop. She didn't look up. "Should have called first," she said flatly. "Where's Jonas?" I asked, stripping off my gloves. "Upstairs, still sleeping probably. He's been a little dramatic." I froze. "Dramatic." She sighed, setting the rag down. "He cried over breakfast. Said I was being mean because I corrected his posture." I stared at her. "Did you hit him?" Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" I repeated slower. "Did you put your hands on him?" Francesca stepped closer, voice lowering. "I disciplined him. That's what grandmothers do when children get mouthy." Just then I heard slow steps on the staircase. Jonas, pale, quiet, eyes downcast. His sleeves tugged too far down over his wrists. He said nothing, but walked straight toward me and slipped his phone into my hand. The phone was warm from his palm, but my hand felt like ice. Jonas didn't say a word, just slid it into mine, then moved behind me like he was afraid of what might come next, not from me, but from her. Francesca stood there, arms crossed, watching like this was a game, and I'd just been dealt a losing hand. I tapped on the screen, voice memos, one file, timestamp 9:17 p.m., the night before. My thumb hovered over the triangle. I looked at Jonas. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. I pressed play. The first sound was her voice, calm, flat, but with a coldness so sharp it cut between syllables. "You think just because your mother wears scrubs that you're better than me, than anyone." A pause. Jonas's voice barely a whisper. "I didn't say that." Another pause. Then a sound, a thump. Hard. Not a slap, not a crash. Something like a fist on wood. A table maybe. Or a wall. Then more words. Low, precise. "I'm not raising another coward. You hear me? You're not special. You need to be broken before the world breaks you for real." Another impact. Then silence. Except for one breath, shaky, small, Jonas's breath. My knees buckled slightly. I had to grip the edge of the kitchen counter to stay upright. I looked at Francesca. She didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't even blink. She said context matters. I stared at her. "You called him a coward," I said, voice raw. "You said he needed to be broken." "I was parenting," she snapped. "Something you clearly never learned to do. That boy, he's soft. And soft boys grow into useless men." I stepped forward, close enough to smell the peppermint tea on her breath. "Don't ever speak about him like that again." She laughed. "What are you going to do, arrest me?" I turned to Jonas. He stood still, eyes glassy, but not broken. "Not yet." And I'd be damned if I let her finish what she started. I reached for my bag, grabbed his overnight clothes, shoved them into a grocery sack, and wrapped my coat around him. Francesca called out as we walked toward the door. "You think you're protecting him now. But when he grows up weak and useless, remember it was you who taught him that silence is power." I didn't turn around, but I spoke loud enough to echo in the kitchen tiles. "No, he taught me that. And silence just became your undoing." Outside, the cold slapped me back to life. I opened the car. Jonas climbed in without a word. We didn't speak all the way home. Didn't need to, because truth doesn't need a voice when it's been recorded. And as soon as I got him inside safe, warm home, I called the sheriff's office. The woman on the phone had a steady voice. "Wintermere Point Sheriff's Office. This is Deputy Ames." I'd rehearsed what to say in my head 5, maybe 6 times, but when it came out, it still sounded fractured. "I have audio evidence," I said. "My son, he was verbally abused by his grandmother. He recorded it." A pause. "Do you and your son feel safe right now?" I glanced over. Jonas was curled on the couch, wrapped in his old navy blanket, with holes at the seams. His laptop was on his knees, but he wasn't typing, just staring at the blinking cursor. "Yes," I said. "We're okay. But I need to make sure it doesn't happen again." They scheduled an officer visit for the next day, told me to save the recording, back it up, be ready. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept checking the front door like Francesca would show up out of nowhere, banging, screaming, demanding we hand him back. But she didn't. Not a call, not a message, not even silence with meaning. Just absence. The kind that made me wonder if she knew she'd finally crossed the line I'd never let her approach again. Jonas slept with the hall light on. He didn't ask, he just did it. And I didn't stop him. Instead, I sat by his bed for a few minutes longer than usual, brushing the hair from his forehead, like I used to when he was 5. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked. He shook his head. "I just wanted to stop echoing," he whispered. I didn't ask what it was, I knew. The next morning, Officer Mallory Quinn arrived right on time. She wore a navy jacket, small-town badge on her chest, clipboard in hand. Her presence didn't feel like intrusion. It felt like someone finally stepping into the dark with a flashlight. Jonas stayed upstairs while I explained everything. The shift schedules, the phone handoff, the bruises I hadn't noticed until later. I played the voice note for her. She closed her eyes while listening just for a moment. And when it ended, she opened them and said, "That's enough. Not that's horrible, not that's shocking. Just, that's enough." It felt like the first confirmation that I wasn't overreacting, that protecting my child hadn't made me the villain. She asked if Jonas would be willing to speak with someone, a child trauma specialist, someone who could assess if charges should move forward. "I'll ask him," I said, but I already knew the answer. He'd do it, not because he wanted revenge, but because he didn't want this happening again, to him or to anyone. Before she left, Officer Quinn handed me a card. Said, "You did the right thing, Ms. Lee, even when it feels like the whole town won't agree." That stuck with me, because she was right. Windermere Point didn't like mess, especially not the kind that made people question a woman they'd once voted Teacher of the Year. By Friday, people had started whispering. Windermere Point doesn't spread rumors. It marinates in them, lets them soak into church pews, gas pumps, and produce aisles. At the grocery store, I caught a woman I knew, Barbara Milburn, PTA treasurer, looking straight at Jonas's name on the printed police slip I forgot in my purse. She looked up, didn't say a word, but her expression said enough. "You really called the cops on your own mother." That weekend, Jonas had his first session with Dr. Eric Murney. Office smelled like bergamot and old paper, bookshelves full of puzzles and emotion charts. Jonas didn't say much, but when we left, he reached for my hand in the parking lot. I hadn't felt that weight in weeks. It was small, but grounding, like he was letting me back in. Dr. Murney later told me privately, he's guarded, but bright. The kind of kid who internalizes everything and turns it into logic or guilt. Right now, he's asking himself if it was his fault. That sentence broke something in me. That night, Francesca called. I shouldn't have answered, but part of me, the daughter part, still hadn't fully died. "I hope you're enjoying your little stunt," she said, voice sharp but too smooth, like a teacher masking fury with diction. "You think you've won something?" I stayed silent. She continued, "All you've done is teach that boy that emotion wins over discipline. You're raising a generation of victims." My jaw clenched. "I'm raising someone who knows he doesn't have to be afraid in his own home." Afraid, she spat. "I barely touched him. And now you've turned him into a liar with a microphone." I didn't yell, didn't scream. I said goodbye, Francesca, and hung up. The next morning, I filed for a temporary restraining order. Officer Quinn delivered it that afternoon. Francesca didn't fight it, didn't protest. She just signed, eyes locked on mine, and muttered, "You're not nearly as strong as you think you are, Rowena." But I was stronger than I'd ever been. Later that week, Jonas showed me a game he was building. Pixelated world. Characters walking through distorted sound waves. "What's it called?" I asked. He shrugged, then smiled for the first time in days. "Echo Defense. It's about a boy who defeats the villain by playing back what they said so everyone can hear." I nearly cried, but instead I said the only thing that mattered. "That's genius, and it's exactly what you're doing." The letter came in a plain white envelope, stamped with county ink. No drama, no emotion, just process. Inside, notice of pending investigation. Verbal and emotional abuse of a minor. Alleged victim, Jonas Lee. Alleged perpetrator, Francesca Lee. My mother. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it, tucked it in my desk drawer, and sat in silence for nearly 10 minutes. The air felt thick, like Windermere itself was holding its breath. The investigation meant something real was happening. No longer just whispers. No longer just doubt. Now it was evidence, procedure, truth under oath. And it also meant something else. I couldn't undo this, even if I wanted to, even if she begged, even if the town turned its back on us completely. The door had closed. I'd drawn the line. And this time, I wasn't the little girl afraid of being slapped with a look. Later that night, I sat on the couch with Jonas, a mug of tea warming both our hands. He looked up at me, his voice fragile but clear. Does this mean we don't have a grandma anymore? I held his gaze. It means we don't have someone who gets to hurt you and call it love. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly, and leaned into me just a little, but enough. That's when I knew we'd passed the point of no return, and we were walking forward on our own terms. There's no manual for what comes after pressing play on the truth. The voice note was out there now, stored on police servers, backed up in cloud drives, echoing in my mind during every silent moment. But exposure wasn't closure. It was just the beginning. The sheriff's department opened the investigation within 72 hours. Officer Quinn returned with another deputy. This time, everything felt official: forms, signatures, the Miranda-like clarity of you don't have to speak. They didn't bring Francesca in yet, not yet. First, they needed a full statement. From me, from Jonas, from anyone who had seen, heard, or sensed the storm. I sat at our kitchen table, filling out every line. Chronology, context, history. What used to be memories I avoided were now case notes. Jonas sat on the couch, hugging a hot water bottle. He hadn't eaten much. I offered grilled cheese, then cereal, then cocoa. He shook his head at all three. When it was his turn to speak with the officers, I offered to leave the room. He said, "No, stay, just don't talk." It hurt, but I understood. This was his truth now. He spoke in short, firm sentences. She called me names. She said I was weak. She slammed something. I think it was the table. I felt small. Quinn nodded through it all, taking notes. She didn't rush, didn't try to fix it. At the end, she asked, "Do you feel safe with your mom?" Jonas looked at me, then back at her. "I feel safe now," he said, because she believed me. That night I cried in the laundry room, silently, face buried in a clean towel. Grief, rage, relief, it all crashed at once. Because nothing prepares you for the moment your child thanks you for protecting them from your own mother. Hi. The next step was therapy. Dr. Murney worked out of a converted guest house at the edge of town. It smelled of lavender oil and old textbooks. A wall of calming water rippled in the corner. Everything designed to say, "You are safe here." Jonas didn't talk much the first session, but the second time he asked Dr. Murney, "Is it weird if I remember what she wore that night more than what she said?" The doctor smiled. "No, that's how trauma hides. In colors, in smells, in background noise." Jonas nodded, then whispered she wore navy blue, and a gold pin that looked like an eagle. He began sketching the pin during session 3, not as a symbol, but as a level boss in his game. Echo defense had become more than a distraction. It was a language. Jonas designed levels where monsters shouted scripted phrases. The player couldn't attack them directly. They had to record the words, play them back at the right moment, and use the villain's own cruelty against them. In level 6, the main villain yelled, "No one cares how you feel," until her own echo trapped her in a shrinking circle of light. When I saw it, I stood behind Jonas quietly and whispered, "That's what healing looks like." He didn't reply, but he clicked, "Save." Meanwhile, I began gathering more testimony. I spoke to Nora, the neighbor who lived 2 doors down from Francesca. She was hesitant at first, didn't want to get involved. But one afternoon, she brought over a half-burnt batch of lemon bars and said softly, I heard her scream at him, twice. Once she called him a mistake with opinions. I just didn't know what to do. I told her she just did it. I also reviewed after the recording. I hired a modest attorney through the Victims Protection Program. He told me, don't worry about theatrics. The tape does the work. Jonas testified via video. He sat in a quiet side room with his therapist beside him. He spoke clearly. She told me I was nothing. I didn't feel human when she yelled. I recorded it because I didn't think anyone would believe me unless they heard it. There wasn't a single dry eye in the courtroom monitor room. When Francesca took the stand, she looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but spiritually. Like something had already fractured. She didn't apologize. She said I was doing what mothers have always done, prepare boys for the real world. The judge replied, and do you believe calling a 13-year-old a coward prepares him for anything but fear? She didn't answer. That silence was louder than the tape. Judgment came 1 week later. Guilty. Verbal and emotional abuse of a minor. 1 year of mandated counseling. 80 hours of community service. Permanent no-contact order with Jonas. She left the courthouse without a word. Not to the judge, not to me, not even to herself. Jonas and I walked out to sunlight. Real sunlight. He looked up at me and said, "Does this mean she won't hurt me again?" I knelt down, met him at eye level. "It means she won't get the chance." He nodded, then whispered, "I think I'm ready to finish the game." That night he uploaded Echo Defense. In the final boss level, when the echo breaks through, the villain dissolves into pixels. Not from violence, but from being heard. On the screen appears a single line. "What they said about you doesn't define you, but what you believe about yourself does." Legal victory doesn't come with applause. There's no confetti outside the courthouse, no cheering crowds, only quiet. The kind that reminds you you didn't win a game. You survived a storm. The Monday after the verdict, I returned to the grocery store. The cashier who used to greet me by name now scanned my items in silence. When I looked up, she met my eyes for a second, then quickly glanced down at the barcode. Behind me, I heard someone whisper, "That's her. The daughter who took her mother to court." Another voice replied, "Can you blame her?" Wintermere Point had split down the middle.
Nice.
At the hospital, 2 nurses stopped inviting me to their coffee runs. The shift manager accidentally scheduled me for 4 overnight shifts in a row. Francesca had been part of this town for over 40 years, a respected teacher, a no-nonsense pillar of discipline. Me, I was the child who had exposed her. And Jonas, he was the kid who recorded it all. But while the town turned cold, our house began to warm again. Jonas started humming under his breath. He asked for pancakes instead of cereal. He came home one day from therapy with a drawing. It was a cartoon version of him. Cape shield, a recorder in one hand. In big block letters, it read, "Silence is a superpower." He stuck it on the fridge with a magnet. And for the first time in what felt like years, he laughed at his own joke. His game, Echo Defense, crossed 5,000 downloads in 2 weeks. He got emails from across the country. One from a 12-year-old in Arizona. "I played your game. My stepdad talks like that." I showed it to my mom. She believed me. Another from a teacher in Oregon. "Can we use your story in a class on digital storytelling?" He read them all, replied to some. But one message he printed and framed. It said, "You helped my brother speak up. You gave us the words." As for me, I stopped bracing every time the phone rang, stopped rereading the court order to check if it was still valid. I started reading novels again, not medical journals, not case law, just books, stories, ones where the villain didn't always wear black but was always unmasked. Francesca never called again, not for Easter, not for Jonas's birthday, not when her house went up for sale. I heard she moved to live with her cousin 2 states over. Rumor was she told people I turned Jonas against her. Maybe I did. Maybe she should have asked why it worked so easily. There were still moments I questioned myself. When I saw grandmothers holding hands with grandkids. When Jonas had a school concert and there was only 1 chair saved. But then he looked out from the stage, found my face in the crowd, and waved with both hands, as if to say, "I see you. I'm okay." And that was enough. One night, months later, Jonas and I sat on the back porch, watching stars blink into the night sky. "Do you think she ever loved me?" he asked. I took a long breath. "I think she loved the idea of strength. And you didn't fit that idea, so she tried to change you." He nodded, then looked up. "But I didn't change. I just got louder." I smiled and reached for his hand. "No, sweetheart, you got heard. And there's a difference. Climax doesn't always happen in the courtroom. Sometimes it happens on a porch, under stars. When a mother realizes she didn't just protect her son, she helped him rebuild his voice." Spring came slowly to Wintermere Point. The lake thawed, the trees blinked into bloom, and our house, once full of whispers, was now filled with sound. The good kind. Keyboard clicks, blender buzzing in the kitchen, Jonas laughing at videos he used to mute. The silence was gone, but not because we forced it out. We just stopped fearing it. Jonas got invited to speak at a digital storytelling camp that June. He stood on a small stage projector behind him, a screen that read, "Echo Defense Turning Hurt into Game Design." He talked about monsters, about echoes, about using voice notes as shields. And then at the end, he looked straight at the group of kids in front of him and said, "If someone tells you you're too sensitive, maybe they're scared you'll notice things they'd rather hide." The room went still. Then someone clapped. And then another. After the talk, a girl around his age came up to him. She wore oversized headphones and had nervous fingers. "I record stuff too," she said. "My stepbrother thinks it's weird." Jonas just smiled. "It's not weird, it's wise." That evening we sat in our backyard. He asked me, "Do you think other kids will make games like mine?" I looked at him. "I think they'll make better ones, because you gave them permission to. Francesca is just a name in paperwork now. a shadow we've stopped walking under. And honestly, I don't hate her anymore. I just don't follow her anymore. The cycle broke, the echo stopped, and what came after was real and raw and healing. If you're a parent, listen even when it's uncomfortable. If you're a child, speak even when your voice shakes. And if you're both, know that love should never sound like control. It should sound like this. I believe you. You're enough. You matter even when you're quiet. What would Reddit say? 1. She destroyed her family. Number 2. She saved her son. Drop your vote. Share your thoughts. Where are you listening from? And if you believe sensitivity is a kind of strength, subscribe. Because there are more stories like this waiting to be heard.